I'm Richard Feynman, and when people ask me why time cannot be reversed, I already know the mistake they make. They imagine time as something mechanical, like a film reel that could simply be run backward if we knew how. But time is not a reel. It is not a river flowing independently of the universe. Time is not even a thing in the way people think things are. Time is a consequence. It is an outcome of how the universe organizes change. And once you understand that, the question stops being why can't we reverse time and becomes why would we ever expect that we could? The universe does not move forward because it prefers the future. It moves forward because the structure of physical law makes reversal overwhelmingly unlikely. Not forbidden by magic, not blocked by some cosmic wall, but crushed by probability so extreme that reversal effectively never happens. This is uncomfortable because humans love symmetry. We like the idea that if something can happen one way, it should be able to happen the other way too. Physics often respects symmetry. Time does not, and the reason has nothing to do with clock, calendars, or human perception. It has everything to do with how order collapses into disorder. At the microscopic level, the laws of physics are shockingly indifferent to time's direction. If you watch a few atoms collide, bounce, exchange energy, and you play that process backward, the equations don't complain. They work just fine. This fact has misled generations of people into thinking time reversal should be possible in principle. But here's the trap. Microscopic reversibility does not scale up. The moment you deal with large numbers of particles, trillions upon trillion, the universe stops being forgiving. Every interaction leaves a trace. Energy spreads. Information disperses. Correlations break apart. The number of possible disordered arrangements explodes so rapidly that returning to the original ordered state becomes effectively impossible. Not difficult, not impractical. Impossible in every meaningful sense. This is not philosophy. This is statistics. The universe doesn't remember the past because it doesn't need to. It only needs to obey probability. And probability overwhelmingly favors one direction. The direction where disorder increases. That direction is what you call the future. This is where entropy enters the story, and people often misunderstand. Entropy is not chaos. It is not decay. It is not destruction. Entropy is simply the number of ways a system can be arranged without changing its overall appearance. A broken cup has vastly more possible arrangements than an intact one. That's why cups break but never unbreak themselves. Not because it violates physics, but because the universe would have to coordinate an astronomically precise conspiracy of atoms to reverse it. And the universe does not conspire. It follows number. Every second that passes increases the number of possible microscopic arrangements consistent with the present state. That increase gives time its arrow. You experience time flowing forward because you are riding that statistical avalanche. Trying to reverse time is like trying to unspill ink from water by waiting long enough. The laws allow it. Reality will never deliver it. And that distinction between what is allowed and what actually happens is the key to understanding why time cannot be reversed, ever. One of the strangest things about time is that it only seems to flow in systems that can remember. Memory itself is asymmetric. You remember the past, never the future. That feels obvious, but it hides something profound. Memory is not free. To record information, a physical system must increase entropy somewhere else. Every memory you form, every neuron that changes state, every synapse that strengthens, creates heat. That heat disperses into the environment, increasing disorder. Memory is paid for with entropy. This means the act of knowing the past actively prevents the future from being remembered in the same way. If time were reversible, memory would be reversible too, but it isn't. You cannot unremember something without further increasing entropy. The arrow of time is written into the very process that allows experience to exist. A universe with no arrow of time would have no observers capable of noticing it. The fact that you experience time at all already tells you which direction entropy is moving. People sometimes imagine that if we could just control every particle, track every atom, reverse every velocity, we could rewind the universe like a clock. This idea sounds reasonable until you actually calculate what it would require to reverse time. Even for a small object, you would need information about the exact quantum state of every particle it has interacted with, including the surrounding environment. That information is not merely hidden, it is destroyed. When energy spreads into microscopic degrees of freedom, it becomes inaccessible in principle, not just in practice. The universe does not keep backup. Once correlations are lost, they are gone. This is why entropy increase is not just likely, it is irreversible. The future is not forbidden from becoming the past, it is statistically erased from being able to do so. Reversal would require the universe to spontaneously generate missing information, which would violate the same probabilistic structure that makes physics work. This also explains why time travel stories fail at the most basic level. They assume time is a coordinate you can move through independently of everything else, but time is not a road, it is a bookkeeping system for change. You cannot go backward through time because backward no longer exists as a physical state the universe can occupy. The past is not stored anywhere waiting to be revisited. It is a lower entropy configuration that the universe has already abandoned. Trying to return to it is like trying to make smoke reassemble into wood by waiting long enough. There is no mechanism for it, no handle to grab, no switch to flip. The universe has moved on, not emotionally, not philosophically, but statistically. And statistics, unlike stories, do not bend. To understand why time cannot be reversed, you must look not at clock, but at the universe itself. Time's arrow did not emerge locally, it was imposed globally. The early universe began in an extraordinary extraordinarily low entropy state. That fact is not poetic, it is mathematical. The universe started smoother, more ordered, more uniform than almost any other state it could have occupied. This is the real mystery. Not why entropy increases, but why it ever started so low. Once that initial condition existed, everything else followed inevitably. Entropy had only one direction to go. The universe did not choose to move forward in time. It had no alternative. Every star forming, every galaxy clustering, every molecule assembling was riding the same thermodynamic slope. Time flows forward because the universe began in a state that made all other directions overwhelmingly improbable. This means the arrow of time is not written into the laws of physics. It is written into the universe's boundary condition. The equations themselves do not care which way time points, but the universe does, because it began unevenly balanced. Once you accept this, the idea of reversing time collapses completely. To reverse time, you would need to return the entire universe to its original low entropy configuration, not just locally, not just partially, everywhere. Every photon, every particle, every correlation would have to be restored with impossible precision. This is not engineering difficulty. This is logical impossibility under probabilistic law. The universe cannot forget entropy any more than it can forget arithmetic. The past is not a place. It is a condition that no longer exists. People often confuse reversibility with symmetry. They think that because equations look symmetrical, reality must be reversible. That is a mistake born from ignoring scale. A single billiard ball can reverse direction. A gas of trillions of billiard balls cannot spontaneously unmix. Symmetry at the microscopic level does not survive contact with complexity. The moment systems become large enough to store information, dissipate energy, and interact with environments, time direction becomes locked in. This is why life, memory, evolution, and history all require an arrow of time. Without irreversibility, nothing could accumulate. Nothing could persist. Nothing could learn. A reversible universe would be static in every meaningful sense. The fact that anything happens at all depends on time being one way. People sometimes think relativity offers an escape hatch. They hear that time slows down, that different observers experience different durations, and they imagine that maybe time's direction is negotiable. It isn't. Relativity changes how time is measured, not how it behaves thermodynamically. You can stretch time, tilt it, redistribute it between observers, but you cannot reverse its arrow. Even in relativistic physics, entropy still increases along every observer's world line. No matter how fast you move, no matter how deep you go into a gravitational field, your personal time always moves in the same direction relative to entropy. Space-time may be flexible, but irreversibility is rigid. Relativity reshapes the geometry of time, not its statistical foundation. Time dilation does not rewind processes, it only changes their rate. A slow-burning fire is still burning. A slowed clock is still moving forward. People sometimes think relativity offers an escape hatch. They hear that time slows down, that different observers experience different durations, and they imagine that maybe time's direction is negotiable. It isn't. Relativity changes how time is measured, not how it behaves thermodynamically. You can stretch time, tilt it, redistribute it between observers, but you cannot reverse its arrow. Even in relativistic physics, entropy still increases along every observer's world line. No matter how fast you move, no matter how deep you go into a gravitational field, your personal time always moves in the same direction relative to entropy. Space-time may be flexible, but irreversibility is rigid. Relativity reshapes the geometry of time, not its statistical foundation. Time dilation does not rewind processes, it only changes their rate. A slow-burning fire is still burning. A slowed clock is still moving forward. This is why closed time-like curves and other mathematical curiosities in space-time do not represent real escape routes. They exist as solutions to equations, but solutions are not guarantees of physical reality. Physics is not obligated to realize every mathematical possibility. Nature selects consistency. Any space-time configuration that allows macroscopic time reversal would also allow contradictions affect preceding causes, information appearing without origin. The universe refuses these outcomes not by rule but by structure. The same entropy that defines time's arrow also protects causality. Once information spreads, it cannot be reassembled without violating the probabilistic framework that keeps reality stable. The universe is conservative not because it is cautious, but because it must be. At this point, people usually retreat to quantum mechanics, hoping it will rescue reversibility. Quantum systems evolve according to equations that are again time-symmetric, but measurement ruins the illusion. The moment a quantum system interacts with the environment, coherence is lost. Information leaks outward into degrees of freedom that cannot be tracked. This process, decoherence, is irreversible in exactly the same statistical sense as entropy increase. Quantum mechanics does not reverse time. It explains why classical irreversibility emerges so quickly and so completely. Even at the smallest scales, once a system becomes entangled with the rest of the universe, the arrow locks in. There is no quantum rewind button. There is only forward branch. What people really want when they ask about reversing time is not physics. It's undoing. They want broken things to unbreak, mistakes to unmake themselves, loss to politely step backward. Physics does not exist to satisfy regret. It exists to describe what happened. And what happens is this. Information spreads. Once it spreads, it cannot be recollected without an improbable miracle that grows exponentially less likely with every particle involved. You can reverse the motion of a few atoms in a laboratory. You cannot reverse a glass shattering on the floor in any practical sense, not because it is forbidden by equation, but because the number of microscopic states that correspond to glass intact is vanishingly small compared to those that correspond to glass broken. Time's arrow is not enforced by authority. It is enforced by statistics. This also explains why memory works the way it does. You remember the past because records exist. Photographs, fossils, brain states, radiation patterns. These are all physical imprints created by irreversible process. The future has no records because records require entropy increase to exist in the first place. You cannot remember tomorrow for the same reason you cannot unburn firewood. Memory is not proof that time flows forward. Memory is a consequence of the same processes that force time to flow forward. Conscious experience rides on entropy gradient. Awareness does not cause time's direction. It is carried by it. Remove irreversibility and experience collapses with it. At the deepest level, time is not something moving. It does not flow like a river. That metaphor is wrong and always has been. What exists are ordered correlations between states of the universe. Earlier states have fewer correlations. Later states have more. Entropy measures that growth of correlation. Time's direction is simply the direction in which correlations accumulate. Asking whether time could reverse is equivalent to asking whether the universe could spontaneously uncorrelate itself at every scale simultaneously. That is not forbidden, but it is so fantastically improbable that for all physical purposes it will never happen. Not once, not anywhere, not ever.
The reason the future feels open while the past feels fixed has nothing to do with freedom and everything to do with information. The past is constrained because it has already left records. Those records restrict what could have happened. The future has no records yet, so many outcomes remain compatible with the present state. This asymmetry creates the illusion that the future is undetermined while the past is locked. But this does not require time to flow or reverse. It only requires that entropy increases and information disperses. Possibility collapses into fact as correlations form. Once formed, they cannot be undone without destroying the very structure that allows facts to exist. That is why you can influence what happens next, but never what has already happened. Influence requires unfinished correlation. Completion seals it permanently.
The reason the future feels open while the past feels fixed has nothing to do with freedom and everything to do with information. The past is constrained because it has already left records. Those records restrict what could have happened. The future has no records yet, so many outcomes remain compatible with the present state. This asymmetry creates the illusion that the future is undetermined while the past is locked. But this does not require time to flow or reverse. It only requires that entropy increases and information disperses. Possibility collapses into fact as correlations form. Once formed, they cannot be undone without destroying the very structure that allows facts to exist. That is why you can influence what happens next, but never what has already happened. Influence requires unfinished correlation. Completion seals it permanently.
This also explains why free will feels real even in a universe governed by strict physical law. Decisions are not violations of physics. They are physical processes unfolding in systems far from equilibrium. The brain is a machine that amplifies microscopic uncertainty into macroscopic insight. It does not escape the arrow of time. It depends on it. A choice is not a moment outside causality. It is a branching of correlations into different future records. Once that branching occurs, the chosen path becomes part of the path and is just as irreversible as anything else. Freedom is not the ability to reverse time. Freedom exists only because time does not reverse. Without irreversibility, decisions would leave no trace and therefore no meaning. When people imagine time reversal, they imagine watching a movie played backwards, smoke returning to cigarettes, ash reassembling into wood. But this is a trick of representation. The universe does not store frames that can be reversed. It stores states, and those states evolve by spreading information outward. To reverse time would require collecting every scattered bit of information from photons, air molecules, thermal noise, quantum field, and reassembling them into a prior configuration with perfect precision. That is not merely impractical, it is effectively impossible. The universe would have to conspire against its own statistics, and it never does. So here is the final truth, stripped of metaphor and wishful thinking. Time cannot be reversed because the universe is not built to preserve reversibility, it is built to generate structure. Stars burn fuel, galaxies form patterns, life organizes matter, minds record information, and every one of these processes depends on entropy increasing somewhere else. Order is purchased by disorder. Meaning is purchased by irreversibility. If time could run backwards, structure would dissolve. Records would erase themselves. Causes would no longer anchor effect. The universe would lose the very mechanism that allows complexity to exist. Time's direction is not a flaw in reality. It is the price reality pays to be interesting at all. And this is why there will never be a machine that turns time around. Not because engineers lack imagination, not because physics is incomplete, but because reversing time would require undoing the statistical foundation of the universe. You would have to make the overwhelmingly likely become overwhelmingly unlikely everywhere at once. You would have to unmix what nature insists on mixing. The arrow of time is not a law you can break. It is a consequence you cannot avoid. The universe does not move forward because it wants to. It moves forward because there is no other stable direction to go. And once you understand that, the question stops being, why can't time be reversed? The real question becomes, how could it ever have gone any other way?